steam engine for its type is the fastest land vehicle. And the steam team are the power behind freight and express services that make up the Northwestern Railway. This is the Northwestern Adventures. Skarloey, Renias and Proteus worked on the Skarloey Railway together for over 50 years now. Skarloey takes passengers around. Renias takes freight cars around. Proteus works at the slate quarry. Things went fine for the three engines for many years until 1934. One afternoon Skarloey was under maintenance. So that meant Renias and Proteus had to work the line until Skarloey was fixed. One day Proteus had to take some new freight cars around. These freight cars were originally from the Minnesota Railway, so they thought that Proteus was Falcon. They wanted to play a trick on Proteus. Their chance soon came. Somewhere near the mountains, there is an old cliff, and that, mixed in with the fact that it was a windy day, did not make things better for Proteus. A loose rock got stuck on the tracks, which made things very dangerous. Proteus did not see where they were going, but just at the right moment, they broke the coupling. I will spare the details of what happened next. I'll just say that all of Proteus was destroyed except his lamp. After the event, people thought that the lamp was magical and brought good luck. The event was not good for the Skarloey Railway's reputation. People thought the railway wasn't safe to travel on. Less and less people came to the line. For the next 17 years, the line was on the threat of closing. The other narrow-gauge railway, the Minnesota Railway, was doing worse than the Skarloey Railway for another bad event that happened a few months later, but the effects of this one was far worse. The Minnesota Railway has owned 12 engines in its history. As of 1934, 10 of them were still running strong on the AMSR. The 10 engines are Duke, Bertram, Atlas, Alfred, Falcon, Albert, Jim, Tim, Sid, and Stuart. The two aren't with the AMSR anymore are Crimson and Stanley. Crimson was scrapped in 1904 and Stanley was turned into a generator in 1924. But the MSR would suffer a terrible incident in which it never fully recovered. One day Sid was getting a train set up for Bertram.
Here you go, Bertram. Here is your train of slate trucks you need to take to Crovan's Gate.
Thanks, Sid. Tell Atlas and Alfred that they're doing a great job in the mines. Then Bertram left with his train. The trucks were being extra troublesome, but they didn't know that the bridge was out. They didn't know until it was too late. Bertram and the trucks didn't survive. A similar thing happened with the Skarloey Railway a few months earlier. But this was only the beginning of the end. Atlas and Alfred were working on a strangely rainy May evening. Atlas had to go up to the top of the incline with some workmen to fix the winch. But the rain made things slippery, so Atlas just slid down halfway through. How am I going to get up there? Just then Alfred showed up with some bad news. Turns out that the mines have completely flooded. I barely escaped with my life. Just then an old boulder fell down and knocked Alfred off the tracks. Alfred, are you okay? Yeah. I love destruction, but I didn't want to be destroyed. Thankfully, I'll be okay. Just then Sid showed up just as the quarry started to flood.
Looks like I got here just in time. It looks like Atlas needs help. Or is it Alfred? Sorry, but I can never tell you two apart.
It's Alfred that needs help this time, and hurry. The quarry's starting to flood. Any higher and our fires will go out. Sid then somehow managed to get Alfred back on the tracks. But just as they all got out, the damage had been done. The mines were completely destroyed. Atlas, Alfred and Sid were all without a home. The mines could not be repaired. That meant that Atlas and Alfred had to be sold in June 1934. Stanley was scrapped that same month because he was badly damaged in the flood. Albert then had to be sold in September 1934. Jim was sold in December 1934. Tim was sold in May 1935. Sid was sold in October 1935. By 1936, only Duke, Stewart and Falcon were still running on the line. It's unknown where the other engines went after being sold, but with the decline of steam engines until the 1960s it could be assumed that most were sadly scrapped. The three engines worked their hardest to run the line for the next 11 years but sadly had to close in 1947. Stewart and Falcon were sold to the Soder Aluminum Works, but that is a story for another day. While Duke was put in an old shed where for the next 22 years, he became trapped inside the shed. Previously on the Northwestern Adventures, I talked about how the Minnesota Railway closed in 1947 and the events leading up to it. I have been waiting until now to tell this specific story. I wasn't a part of it, but here's the story I heard from the engines themselves. It was January 1947 when the owner of the MSR came to see Duke, Stewart, and Falcon. Today's the day. The railway's officially closed. This afternoon, someone will show up to buy some engines and rolling stock. It's for narrow gauge and standard gauge quarry at Peel Godred. You might as well say your goodbyes now. Then the owner walked away. I have been working on this railway for 57 years. I'm upset to see it close. We are too grandpuff. Even the coaches and freight cars were upset to say goodbye. Then a man who liked to dress like me walked up to the sheds. We'll take Stewart, Falcon, two of the coaches to transport workmen and all the freight cars. The only things that weren't bought was Duke and one coach. About an hour later, Stewart and Falcon said goodbye to Duke. Cheer up, grandpuff. We'll find a nice railway and then you can come and keep us in order. They tried to stay positive, but neither thought that their wish would come true. Stewart and Falcon left with tears in their eyes. Duke and the coach were both put into a shed where they has been ever since. At least at the time I am telling you these stories, which is the year 1955. Stewart and Falcon were taken to a construction site where two standard gauge engines and a lorry were already there. It was Neil and Wendell. The lorry was simply named Lorry. The five worked together for about 4 years. Everything changed in 1951. Falcon was feeling sick that day, which made Stewart do his jobs. At the highest point of the quarry there was a giant boulder. Stewart didn't read the warning signs. He bumped the boulder, which caused an avalanche. A rock broke a power line and set Peel Godred Station on fire. The Peel Godred quarry had to shut down. Neil was sent back to Knapford Harbour. Wendell was sent back to the Arlesburg branch line. Lorry was sent back to the Soder Construction Company, which was north of Crosby and south of Ellsbridge. Stewart and Falcon were sheeted up and 1 year later were finally sold to their permanent home, the Skarloey Railway, which is where they continue to live to this day. They were given new names in 1952. Falcon became Sir Handel and Stewart became Peter Sam. This is also when episodes 1, 2 and 3 of the Narrow Gauge Adventures takes place. Episodes 4 and 5 of TNG take place in 1953. Anyway, after the Peel Godred fire, I decided to go on a vacation, which is where I met the Northwestern Railway's number 7. But I will save it for next time.